you guys.
Wel, prynhawn da, unwaith eto, I chi gyd. For the last 2 weeks, I have had to report to you that the coronavirus situation in Wales has worsened. Today, the position has deteriorated even further and is now very serious indeed. This slide shows how the fire break, shown on the slide as the grey shaded area, helped successfully to bring down rates of coronavirus, turning back the clock on its spread. But it also shows how quickly the virus has regained its foothold in communities across Wales over the last few weeks. The virus is spreading faster than our models have predicted, and it is now firmly entrenched in so many parts of Wales. And as you can see from the slide, in some parts of Wales, such as Neath Port Talbot, Blaenau Gwent and Rhondda Cynon Taf, the rates are now incredibly high. These very high levels of coronavirus are translating inevitably into significant and sustained pressure on our NHS. This week, the number of coronavirus-related patients in hospital passed 1,900 for the very first time and continues to rise. If this increase continues at this rate, we could see 2,500 people with coronavirus in hospital by Christmas Day. A very large number of people who catch coronavirus go on to have a serious illness afterwards. They need the careful and expert care of our health service because many will be in hospital for weeks. Our NHS staff are doing an incredible job under very difficult circumstances, and I thank them all for everything they have done throughout the pandemic and continue to do so. But there is only so much we can ask of them. There is only so much we can ask of our National Health Service. Put quite simply, the NHS will not be able to cope as it is today if we continue to see this level of coronavirus-related admissions in the coming weeks, on top of normal winter pressures. Yesterday, the Health Minister agreed that health boards can postpone some appointments and procedures where that has become necessary. Yesterday, the Education Minister announced all secondary schools and colleges will move to online learning from Monday as part of the national effort to bring coronavirus under control. We will require all local authorities, which have had to close primary schools next week because, for example, they have a shortage of teaching staff, to open hub provision for vulnerable children and the children of essential workers until the end of term. And I know that this clarity will be welcomed by local authority leaders. And today, the local government minister will announce the closure of outdoor attractions across Wales. The seriousness of the crisis we face demands no less. Now, I know that there have been rumours and fake news circulating about action that could be taken here in Wales. Let me confirm today, there will not be a nighttime curfew and there is no ban on all alcohol sales. You will always hear about the changes to the measures we are putting in place in Wales directly from myself or from my ministerial colleagues. We will always explain to you why we need to make any changes. And the authoritative news you need comes to you directly from the Welsh Government. And to help with that, next week we will publish an updated coronavirus control plan to help you, businesses and public services plan in these rapidly changing circumstances. We originally published our traffic lights plan in May, in the first wave of the pandemic, as we were moving out of lockdown, before we had test, trace and protect, before the new generation of rapid result tests became available, and before we had a vaccine. That traffic light plan focused on a cautious and gradual unlocking of restrictions as cases were falling. Today, the situation is very different. We have revised the plan using what we have learned over the course of the pandemic about how the virus is rapidly spreading and the latest information from our scientific and medical advisors. And we have drawn on experience elsewhere across the United Kingdom. The revised plan sets out 4 alert levels. Today in Wales, we are at alert level 3. The traffic light is red. The level of risk is very high. Now, I must be clear with everybody this afternoon. If the strengthened measures of last week and the extra actions of this week, together with the efforts each and every one of us need to make, if those measures do not succeed in turning the tide of the virus, then it is inevitable that we will have to consider a move to alert level 4 immediately after Christmas. Now, that move is not a foregone conclusion. The future remains in our hands. If we act together and all reduce the people we see and mix with, we can change the course of this terrible virus. We've done it before when we worked together to protect the NHS and save lives, and we need to do the same thing again now. In the last 7 days, there have been more than 12,000 new cases of coronavirus. That's the size of a town like Carmarthen here in Wales. The virus is here. It is widespread throughout the UK and Wales. The best present any one of us can give our families this year is to have a coronavirus-free Christmas. And for that to happen, we all need to reduce the number of people we see and mix with. The Chief Medical Officer's message to people in Wales this week has been simple. Don't mix with people outside your own household. If we all do that, we can keep our families safe and keep Wales safe too. Diolch yn fawr I chi gyd. As usual now, I will take some questions and all the answers will be broadcast live on the Welsh Government's social media channels. And today I'm going first to James Williams at BBC Wales.
Diolch yn fawr, Prif Weinidog. Can I just start with some practical questions, really? When are you going to announce the new plan? Is it Monday of next week? Could you just give us that detail? Also, with regards to the level 3 level we're at the moment, does that mean this kind of restrictions that we have at the moment? And to clarify, does level 4 look like the sort of fire break lockdown restrictions we had a few weeks ago? Can you just give us some detail on that? Will the plans be implemented on an all Wales basis, and will there be any time limits on them?
Well, James, we plan to publish the document on Monday and hope to have it debated on the floor of the Senedd on Tuesday. We are indeed at level 3, so you're right that the sort of restrictions we have in place now are consistent with a level 3, a red traffic light level. When we move to level 4, it is inevitable that there will be a greater level of restriction. We will set out that in the document next week. We will also set out how, if it were to be the case that some parts of Wales establish themselves in a reliable and predictable and sustainable way as having a different level of the virus to other parts of Wales, it would be possible to have more than one level in Wales. That is not the position we are in Wales today. The virus is rising everywhere in Wales. But the plan will set out the criteria we would use, the judgments that would be needed if that pattern were to change in the future.
So just to confirm, I mean, we're looking at another lockdown if we get to level 4. And also, can I just ask you about schools? At the start of the week, you said that you were sticking by the joint statement by the Welsh Government and the Welsh Local Government Association that schools would stay open until the end of term. You changed course yesterday. Why?
So level 4 restrictions are a step above what we have now, and we're pretty restricted now. So I think it will be self-evident to people that at level 4, there will be even more restrictions on the freedoms we're able to offer people if the numbers cannot be brought to a position where they are falling away from where they are today. The position on schools altered because of the way the numbers are rising. They have been rising even faster this week than they were over the last 2 weeks. By yesterday, the advice of the Chief Medical Officer to myself and to the Education Minister was unequivocal. It was his advice that secondary school students should be taught at home next week. This is not bringing the holidays forward by a week. Those young people will remain in school. They will be receiving their education online and at home, but they will still be receiving an education. And it was the Chief Medical Officer's advice that, in the face of the rising numbers we are seeing and the impact that is having on our health service, we had to take even further measures than the ones we announced last week. And that's why we made the decision that we did. James, diolch. Over to James Crichton-Smith at ITV Wales.
First Minister, thank you. Could you just explain what constitutes an outdoor attraction? Does that include Christmas markets?
James, it doesn't include Christmas markets because they are a form of non-essential retail, but it will include things like winter wonderland attractions and fun fairs and other things that are simply there for entertainment.
Thank you. Is waiting till after Christmas to do anything more significant, bring in a lockdown, isn't that waiting too late when the public health logic, based on your own graphs, would seem to indicate that a lockdown should be being brought in right now. That's what many doctors in Wales are calling for, and yet you're saying that's not going to happen.
Well, James, I took this press conference twice last week, and in both press conferences I was asked repeatedly whether or not we were doing too much, whether the restrictions we were introducing in relation to hospitality and indoor attractions, that this was going too far, that we were in advance of the facts, where was the evidence. This week the question is whether we are going far enough. And I think that just demonstrates that this is constantly a balancing act. It is constantly trying to find the right set of measures to address the issues that we are facing. I believe that with the restrictions that we announced last week, with the changes we are making this week in the health service, in education, in relation to outdoor attractions, that we have a package of measures provided, and this is the most important point, provided in our own lives. We all do those things that have the biggest effect of all, that we have to allow that package to have an impact. If it doesn't have it, if we don't manage to do that, then I'm signalling clearly to people today that more will have to follow. James, thank you. Draw I Thomas Evans at S4C.
Diolch, Prif Weinidog, prynawn da I chi. Cwestiwn i gyntaf ynglyn â'r system haenau newydd. Mae Lloegr a'r Alban eisoes wedi bod mewn system debyg ers rai wythnosau. Gofyn ydw i, rili, pam bod wedi cymryd mor hir i chi i gyflwyno system o'r fath yma yng Nghymru?
Wel, dyn ni ddim wedi cymryd amser hir i wneud e, achos ni wedi cael y system ers mis Mai. A ni wedi cyflwyno'r system nôl yn mis Mai, yn be ni'n wneud heddi yw i ailwampio beth o y dogfen na ac i diweddaru y dogfen, tynnu ar y tystiolaeth ni wedi cael dros y cyfamser, tynnu ar beth ni wedi weld yn yr Alban yn Lloegr a draw y Deyrnas Unedig i gyd. A dwi ddim yn meddwl o gwbl ni wedi bod yn hir yn wneud hynny achos oedd cynllun da ni yn barod. So I was just being asked why we had waited until now to publish a plan next week, and I was simply explaining that this was because we already had a plan that we had published back in May, and what we are doing is updating it and drawing on the evidence that we have assembled in the meantime and the experience elsewhere in the United Kingdom.
Diolch am hynny. Ac ar ysgolion hefyd, pa fath o gefnogaeth fydd ar gael i athrawon cyflenwi sydd efallai yn cael eu cyflogi ar gytundeb tymor byr fel fesul diwrnod o bosib, a fydd yn rhyw gefnogaeth gan y Llywodraeth iddyn nhw?
Wel, wrth gwrs, ni'n siarad gyda'r undebau, ni'n siarad gyda'r awdurdodau lleol, a ni'n trial cynllunio da nhw i wynebu y sefyllfa diweddara sydd da ni. So cwrdais i ddoi gyda'r nifer o bobl yn y maes addysg, a wrth gwrs oedd Gweinidog Kirsty Williams yn cwrdd gyda bobl yn y sector trwy'r prynhawn. Ar ôl beth dwi wedi dweud heddi ac ar ôl beth oeddwn ni'n mynd i cyhoeddi ar dydd Llun, bydd mwy o cyfleon i ni gweithio ar y manylion a weld beth allwn ni wneud i helpu bobl sy'n gweithio in a sector. So just being asked what more we can do to support people who are working in the sector, and I simply explained that we'd spent a lot of time yesterday, myself and the Education Minister, meeting local education authorities, the unions and so forth. After today's announcement and Monday's publication of the plan, there will be more opportunities to meet, to work on some of the details and to see what further we can do to support this very important sector. And maybe I should, where I see them yn Gymraeg, so where allai just ddweud nawr, just i ddweud pa mor ymwybodol ydyn ni am popeth mae'r athrawon o bobl eraill sy'n gweithio yn ein ysgolion wedi wneud dros y Hydref i gyd, and just wanting to pay tribute to the work of our teachers and all those other staff in our schools who have worked so hard to provide an education to our children throughout this difficult and demanding autumn term. Thomas, diolch yn fawr. Over to Hannah Thomas at LBC.
Good afternoon, First Minister. Can you confirm that the tier system in Wales would be Wales-wide? Do you accept that the minimum length of a fire break would need to be longer this time round? And will you give hospitality more notice this time?
Well, the first question, Hannah, is that the plan will allow differential levels in Wales if the circumstances allowed that to happen. It will set out for that to happen. Areas of Wales that are differentiated from other parts of Wales will need to be in that position for a reliable period of time. And we're not at that position today. So if we were going today into level 4, then I would confidently expect that to be a Wales-wide set of arrangements. But the pattern can change over time, and one of the reasons for publishing the document on Monday is to explain to people in different parts of our country how, if there were to be a clear separation between the circumstances in some parts of Wales and others, it would be possible to reflect that in the alert levels. If we go into a higher alert level, then that will not be a fire break period of the sort we had back in October and November, where it was a fixed period of time. We will explain that it will be reviewed on a regular cycle, and if it needed to be renewed, it would have to be renewed. And part of the reason for saying what I'm saying today and publishing the document on Monday is to give hospitality and other sectors of the economy as long a period of notice as we can, because they will be able to see for themselves the way in which those decisions will be made in future.
Thank you. And moving on to Brexit, as things stand, it's looking like there won't be a post-Brexit trade deal agreed. So a new report suggests that MPs suggests that Wales would feel the effects a lot worse than other parts of the UK. So where in your assessment have things gone wrong with the negotiations? And do you think it would always play out this way? And are you resigned to Wales now facing the implications of a no deal?
Well, I'd use this opportunity, Hannah, to say once more to the UK government that they must discharge their responsibility to strike a deal. A no-deal exit from the European Union is disastrous from a Welsh perspective. I've lost count of the number of times I will have said that over recent years. We are more exposed, as the report published today demonstrates, to a no-deal exit than almost any other part of the United Kingdom. A higher percentage of our exports goes to Europe than the United Kingdom as a whole. We have a higher proportion of our economy in manufacturing than any other part of the United Kingdom. We rely on being able to export our agricultural products, safe and fresh, to other parts of Europe. If there are tariff and non-tariff barriers in the path of that trade, that will inevitably make the difficult job of gaining markets and building up business even more difficult. The answer is for this United Kingdom government to deliver on what it said. A year ago today, the Prime Minister was stomping around the country claiming that he had an oven-ready deal. Well, what's happened to the oven and what's happened to the deal? It's their responsibility to make sure that we are not left in that position. Hannah, thank you very much. Over to Will Hayward at Wales Online.
Thank you, First Minister. We all want the restrictions on hospitality to work, but if they don't, we're going to be in real trouble. There must be contingency plans in place for what happens if they don't reduce the number of cases. Given that if it wasn't for Christmas, we'd likely be going into some form of lockdown now, can you tell me what contingency plans the Welsh Government are now working on that could be brought in before Christmas, or are there no plans?
Well, I've announced 3 things that we've done in the past 2 days. So there clearly is a plan, and we are implementing the plan. We are allowing health boards where they have to, because they simply don't have the staff available to do everything that they have been doing, to postpone some activity in order to concentrate on the things that are even more urgent. There are 1,500 fewer staff available in the NHS today than they were in September. And those 1,500 staff are self-isolating because coronavirus is circulating at the levels that it is here in Wales. And if you've got that number of staff not in work, then your ability to carry on doing everything is obviously more difficult. So we've allowed permission there. We made changes to schools yesterday. I'm announcing this morning that we are changing the rules in relation to outdoor attractions. This is on top of everything that we announced last week. And that is a package of measures together, as I repeatedly say, with everything we do in our own lives, that we have to give a chance to make the difference. If it doesn't, then it's inevitable that more restrictions will follow.
Thank you. So I suppose what I was trying to get at really was, if the cases continue to accelerate, not just grow, but the rate that they're growing continues to accelerate, would you consider a lockdown before Christmas? And if I could ask you more details on schools, if I may. When did you receive the advice from the CMO regarding schools? Was this new advice, and was there pressure from the unions a factor in that decision making?
Well, taking your second question first, then, the advice from the Chief Medical Officer was confirmed overnight on Wednesday and into yesterday morning. The Chief Medical Officer, of course, draws on all the advice that he has from SAGE and from our technical advisory group. While I have heard the case that unions have made, our decision was predicated on the public health case that the Chief Medical Officer put to us, and not on any other grounds. In relation to further action before Christmas, I don't expect to need to do that. The measures we have taken together, what each one of us can do, should be allowed a chance to work and should be enough to begin to turn the tide on the accelerating rise in the virus. And we have to be willing to give those things a chance.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Over to Rupert Evelyn at ITN.
Thank you, First Minister. Apologies, I have a dodgy connection, so if it slips away, that's why. Can I just ask you, you know full well that the real issue here is people mixing within their own households, and you're not even delicately putting that in your sort of preamble at the top of the press conference. You're making it very clear that you don't want households mixing, but you're not willing to legislate it for it again right now, which is what you need to be doing, isn't it?
Well, we have legislation on household mixing. 2 households are allowed to form an extended household, and that is it. So it's not that we don't have legislation. I did a session yesterday, Rupert, with a group of primary school children in Wales. And one of them said to me, it is the small acts of selfishness that are getting us into the trouble that we are in. And I just want to put that to people who are listening or watching. That it is when people believe that they themselves do not have to follow the rules, that they act in those small but selfish ways, that we end up in the trouble that we are in. And I think just passing another law is not guaranteed in any way to alter people's behaviours. So we have most people in Wales who continue to do everything they can to follow the advice, to think very carefully. The problem is, it turns out that with this virus, you don't need that many small acts of selfishness before they add up to a set of circumstances in which you see the virus accelerating away, as we're seeing in Wales.
How surprised are you that it is accelerating away? And I suppose I asked that question in the context of Wales was ahead in terms of the firebreak and taking that particular action. The rest of the other nations were some way behind. They look like they're in a better place now, but many people just see this as a kind of Wales as a warning to other nations of what happens as soon as you ease restrictions?
Well, I think if you look what has happened in the rest of the United Kingdom, you can see similar things happening there too. At one time, Leicester was being held up as a warning of what could go wrong. Northern Ireland, which had the lowest rates, and not just in the United Kingdom, but at some points the lowest rates in Europe in the summer, have had rates far higher than we have seen in Wales in the last month or so. And we've seen similar things in the central belt of Scotland. In other words, the fact that we have gone more quickly than we had hoped from the relatively benign position immediately after the firebreak to the very difficult position we are in today is not that different to where many other parts of the United Kingdom have seen themselves already. So in that sense, while this acceleration is faster than our modelling would have predicted, so in that sense, it is more than we had expected, I don't think Wales is in any sense unique in facing this rapidly changing pattern. Just means we've got to be prepared to act and to act together. Rupert, thank you very much indeed. Draw I Adam Hale at PA.
Well, Prif Weinidog, the Chief Medical Officer said on Wednesday that he's cancelling his Christmas plans due to the current state of the crisis in Wales and won't be visiting family in England and Ireland. You previously said that you would be meeting up with people from outside your own household. Have your plans changed?
Well, I won't be leaving Cardiff over Christmas. I won't be travelling anywhere else. So in that sense, I will be doing the same thing as the Chief Medical Officer.
But to clarify that, you will be meeting people from outside your own household, will you?
Well, I have an extended household like everybody else. I will follow the rules like everybody else at Christmas. And as the Chief Medical Officer said, his plans have changed so that he is not planning to travel and he is not planning to see people who he was previously planning to see. So my plans remain. I will be staying in Cardiff. I will be cutting down on people that I see. I will be trying to create some headroom in advance of Christmas, and then I will operate entirely within the rules that are the same for every one of us.
Thank you. Have there been any discussions between the UK's four nations about re-examining the plan for 5 days of relaxed measures over Christmas?
I met with Michael Gove as the Minister in charge of the Cabinet Office with the First Minister of Scotland, Northern Ireland and the Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland on Wednesday of this week. I'm very pleased we've now got a regular pattern of meeting together every week. We did indeed, the question was raised, should we revisit the decision we had made in relation to Christmas? The decision was that we shouldn't do so. Many people will have made plans on the basis of what was announced, but that we would reinforce the message, each one of us would reinforce the message that that extra freedom for those 5 days must be used responsibly, that people must think ahead, plan ahead, reduce the risk, don't do anything that could result in those people who are the most important people to you, the people you have chosen to meet over those 5 days. Please don't do anything that places them at greater and additional risk. And that is a message that we will be reinforcing here in Wales. The United Kingdom government will be reinforcing and will certainly be the message being deployed by my colleagues in Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. Adam, diolch yn fawr. Over to Andrew Forgrave at the Daily Post.
Good afternoon, First Minister. As you'll be aware, there has been considerable disquiet in North Wales about the all-Wales approach to implementing the all-Wales approach to restrictions. Are you able to give more detail now on how a regional system will work, the criteria that you might apply, and whether any travel restrictions may be implemented?
Yes, Andrew, I will, but let me just say to colleagues who are in North Wales that, as I explained last week, numbers are rising everywhere in Wales. Today in North Wales, Conwy is just under 100 per 100,000. Denbighshire is over 100. Flintshire is over 200. Wrexham is over 230 cases per 100,000 of the population, and all but one of the 6 North Wales authorities saw rises again yesterday. The reason for acting on an all Wales basis is to protect people in North Wales. If we had introduced a lower series of restrictions, all that would have meant was that people in North Wales were even less defended against this virus. I am absolutely convinced that we did the right thing and that we did it in the interests of people in those parts of Wales where the virus isn't as high as it is in the South East Wales corner, but where it would be heading that way even faster if we hadn't taken the action that we have. What we will set out on Monday, though, is a set of criteria that we will use to determine which of the alert levels will apply in Wales. And as I said, if we got into a place where there was a reliable difference between some local authorities clearly at a lower level of infection than other parts of Wales, and where that lower level was stable, it wasn't going up and down, where it was stable and reliably below what other people are facing, then we would be able to have a different alert level in different parts of Wales. But those will be the preconditions, that there is a clear separation and that those areas that have a lower circulation of the virus, that is being sustained, not over a matter of days, but over weeks, so we can be confident that we could lower the alert level without putting those people at risk.
Thank you, First Minister. Sorry to labour the point, but are you able to shed more light on the criteria that might be used? In other words, the figures that might be employed to differentiate between the various areas?
Yeah, sure.
Levels.
I can do, Andrew. You'll see them set out more fully on Monday. What we're not going to do is rely on one indicator. We're going to rely on a balanced judgment of the position in different parts of Wales. But amongst the indicators we will use are the rates per 100,000, and not just the global rates, but the rates at under 25s and over 60s as well. We will look at positivity rates. We will look at hospital admission rates. We will look at the number of people who require intensive care to deal with coronavirus. And you will see there are a number of other indicators that are set out in the document we will publish. And we will look at those indicators in the round, coming to a balanced judgment as to whether or not an area genuinely finds itself in a different and less serious level of alert, and where, as I say, it would be safe and in the interests of that local population to put them into a category where the defences, because that's what the restrictions are, aren't they? They are a defence against coronavirus, where those defences could be safely lowered. Andrew, thank you very much. And rapidly rising up the batting order this afternoon, Alan Evans of Llanelli Online.
Diolch, First Minister. It's my Christmas gift. Thank you very much. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, but having tried so many options, some have alluded to today, too soft, too short, too confusing, has the time come to concede that the carrot and stick approach has not worked with the people of Wales, and that perhaps the Welsh Government now accept that the virus cannot realistically be contained by rules, restrictions and behavioural modifiers alone, and that your efforts, however valiant, will have been merely to put off the inevitable phrase when one's children's actions lead to something going horribly wrong. I did try to warn you, but you simply would not listen.
Well, that is a very sobering assessment of things, Alan, and it's probably bleaker, is bleaker than my own, because I still see in the bulk of people in Wales a wish to do the right thing, a wish to follow the rules. We've tried to respond to some of the points you've made by simplifying the rules, by having a national set of rules so that it is easier for people to follow them. It's part of why we will publish the plan next week so that people can see in advance how we will make decisions in future, where I agree with you and have agreed with you over a number of weeks that government rules by themselves will not get us through this pandemic. There are so many things that government can do, and we've done more of that this week. But in the end, this only works if we can convince enough of our fellow citizens that they have a part that they can and need to play.
You have signalled the dangers week after week, and you've urged the people of Wales to take responsibility for preventing or slowing down the spread of coronavirus. You've relied on the advice of the medical establishment and behavioural scientists. You've been accused of losing your grip recently on COVID-19. What options are there left for you? I know you're going to repeat some of what you've said now, but are you prepared to put sentimentality aside and get tougher?
Well, you're right, because I'm bound to explain that. Whereas when I was answering questions, possibly even one from you, Alan, last week, it was all about whether I'd gone too far and what was the evidence for closing hospitality, and we couldn't carry people with us on it. This week we are having to do even more. And I am absolutely sure we did the right thing last week in the light of the figures we've seen this week. So what we're doing in the health service, in schools, in outdoor entertainments, all of those are new measures this week. I don't think that allowing people a brief and modest opportunity to celebrate Christmas together is just sentimentality. It is recognising that for many people, this year has been an incredibly tough time where they have not been able to see people who matter the most to them for weeks and months on end. It's an incredibly difficult balancing act between being realistic with people and serious with people and not pulling back from the difficulties of the situation we're in, while still offering people some hope for the future. Because if you can't offer people some hope, then I think it's very difficult indeed for people to feel that they can play the part we want them to play. There is a small period over Christmas with some modest relaxations that offer people some hope there. And as we rehearsed more last week than today, the vaccination programme, which has started this week in Wales and has gone very well indeed in Wales, together with the new mass testing regimes we have, there is hope on the horizon. We've just got to get through this really tough and difficult patch together so that we are ready to take advantage of those glimmers of hope that we can see in the new year. Alan, thank you very much, Diolch yn fawr. Over to Rob Taylor at wrexham.com.
Good afternoon. The TAC documents regularly stress the importance of simplicity of messaging, and it's been mentioned again this week. Why the reluctance to call this alert level system a tier system? And if they're not the same thing, what's the difference?
I don't know that I think that is a particularly significant point, really. We call it a traffic light system early in the year. It is still a traffic light system, but now with one additional alert level, which is beyond even the red level that we are in at the moment. I'm not sure, Rob, that I think that the titles will make a great deal of difference to our ability to get people to understand them.
Thanks. The point was more about consistency of messaging that comes across. If I understand correctly, it appears local authority areas could find themselves in different alert levels in the future. And if that involves some moving to level 4, isn't that effectively local lockdowns again? And if so, what's different this time with the local lockdown policy to tier 4?
Well, the document we will publish on Monday does indeed set out the possibility of different alert levels in different parts of Wales. I just want to be absolutely clear again that today the whole of Wales is at level 3, and unless things were to change dramatically, I still think that for the foreseeable future an all Wales approach is the most likely. But things can change. We've seen how rapidly coronavirus can change, and if we were to see, as I've said, a stable and reliable differentiation, then it would be sensible to recognise that in the levels that we would deploy. How is that different to the system we had previously? Well, it will be more stable than the system we had previously because, as I've said, an area would need to be reliably in a different position for a sustained period of time, and the criteria around which different levels might be instituted will be a rounded set. We won't be relying on a single trigger, going above 50, going above 100, whatever that would be. It will be a balanced set of indicators that allow us to take a view of the position in an area in the round, and I think that will mean that the system in practice will be significantly different to the pattern of local lockdowns that we tried with some success to begin with earlier in the autumn. Rob, thank you. And finally, today to Tom Magner of Carers World.
Thank you, First Minister. I'd like to explore the short notice announcement by your colleague, the Education Minister, essentially moving education online. You referred earlier to hubs. Young carers and young adult carers in particular rely on up-to-date technology to learn or study online. How will you make sure that each and every pupil has immediate access to sufficient quality technology, Wi-Fi and or mobile signal?
Well, we've done a great deal of this already during the year, over 10,000 devices provided by the Welsh Government and thousands of licences paid for by the Welsh Government to enable young people to be able to study online and remotely. But because we recognise that there are young people in all parts of Wales who are vulnerable in different ways, we will, as I've said today, require local education authorities to keep hubs open where those vulnerable young people can receive their education, able then to draw on the wider resources that that particular school building will have. Of course, they will have staff available to them, but they will also have equipment that those young people who need access to it will be able to get hold of in that way.
Learning also requires discipline, and obviously in a school environment, the framework is there. But in moving online, how will you make sure that each and every pupil applies themselves sufficiently for their education to be uninterrupted and not, in some cases, give in to the temptation of thinking terms finished early?
Well, Tom, I'd rather our young people were in school. I think that is the best place for them to receive their education and for their wider well-being needs to be attended to. We have faced a situation in the last few days where that is, in many practical senses, no longer deliverable because of the extent of coronavirus here in Wales. Now, over this year, our teaching staff, I think, have developed fantastic new ways of teaching remotely, of being in communication with those young people. So they are not on holiday. It's absolutely essential to keep saying this. The school term continues for another week. Those young people will be learning at home. They will be in direct contact with teachers at home. And so any temptation to think that this is just a chance to pack up early and go and enjoy yourself, I hope we will have the conditions in which that will not be the case. And it is significantly one of the reasons why we have moved to close outdoor attractions today. I don't think that it is consistent to say to young people that they can't be in school because things are so difficult, but that Winter Wonderland can still be open, attracting them potentially away from what they should be doing to something that will be even more risky to them than we would wish. So that's why we've taken that action today, and it's partly indeed as a direct response to the point that you've made. Diolch yn fawr, thank you all very much indeed.